Have you ever wondered whether the problems in the world today would exist if we had deeper connection to ourselves, others, and the environment, and acted from that place?
Welcome to the Conscious Action Podcast with your hosts Brian Berneman and Kayla Greenville, who believe that connection is the key to taking conscious action as individuals and creating a better world.
We are here to raise awareness and inspire meaningful action by sharing stories, knowledge, and conversations with thought leaders and change makers.
From sustainability to well-being and everything related to conscious living, our mission is to empower you to be the change that you want to see in the world. Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Conscious Action Podcast. I am Brian Berneman, your host, and I have the pleasure of being joined for this episode by Damon Birchfield. Thank you very much, Damon, first of all, for being here with us. I know you and I've known you now for a while, but for everyone that doesn't know you or doesn't know enough of you, would you be able to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, I'm, as you say, Damon Birchfield. I've been a part, I guess, of the sustainability conversation in New Zealand, really for quite a long time now, about 20, 25 years. And most recently, for the past 5 or 6 years, the primary way I've been part of that conversation is as the CEO of EcoMatters Environment Trust in New Lynn. We are a West Auckland-based charity. We deliver a whole bunch of different initiatives, but the focus is always on working together with community to get better environmental and social outcomes. So yeah, that's where I've been lately.
Wonderful. Before we get too much into that work that you're doing, because I think it's amazing work, and that for those that don't know enough, like I hope that they can be informed a little bit more. But what led you into being interested about the environment, sustainability, and making this part of your life?
It's a good question, and I'm not sure totally the absolute root cause, but certainly I think simply living and growing up in New Zealand, you have a very we're so blessed here that we still have a relatively accessible natural world. So I think generally New Zealanders have a quite close affinity to their environment. And it was certainly, through the teenage years, my friends and myself, we would race out to the West Coast beaches of Auckland, and just having those opportunities to experience nature and the wilderness kind of leads to having an interest in how do you take care of those places. At the same time, sort of as I was going through my 20s, I guess becoming increasingly aware that, our natural environment was under significant stress. The climate change conversation was really starting to come up. I'd got interested in sort of gardening and permaculture as a system, and I think once you start naturally working with the environment, you start to get interested in, okay, what's important, and how do I play a more active role in terms of caring for this? And so, yeah, by the time I was sort of in my late 20s, I really was convinced that this needed to be what I put my life's work into and my effort into. I went to university and I studied urban planning, which is a lot about, how do you make decisions between economy, environment, social outcomes, and really was just very fortunate that I've subsequently been given lots of opportunities to work in local government, with central government, and now in the community sector to do things around trying to make some kind of I want to say improvements, but unfortunately it's often not improvements. It's often just maintaining at this point in time, or at least not going backwards. But, I think there is a momentum for change. and the society as a whole is beginning to realize that, we actually need to make some quite substantial changes if we're going to achieve a viable future for ourselves.
Yes, definitely. And it's so interesting that you mentioned that, because for me, and I talk about this on the podcast a lot, I grew up in Buenos Aires in Argentina, in like a concrete city, not that much nature. I feel here in New Zealand, it's, as you mentioned, there's nature comparatively everywhere.
Yeah.
And easy access to such beauty.
Yeah.
And I can definitely understand that feeling of like, this is amazing. And seeing that we are losing this, how can we keep it? How can we maintain it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. And with that, I wanted to ask, have you seen with, like, in your lifetime already here in New Zealand, like that degradation of the spaces?
Did you say, have I seen it?
Yes.
Absolutely. The New Zealand that I grew up in, when I was a kid in the 1970s, I can't remember ever having to worry about the quality of water in our streams. We just swam in streams. We drank the water in those streams. It just wasn't really a thing. So that's all happened quite quickly. Really the push, I guess, for a lot more productivity from our agricultural sector has just had a marked impact. I'm not picking a fight with farmers and so on. I think that we all know it's an important part of New Zealand's economy, but there's no question that there's a relationship between the types of farming now that New Zealand does since 1980s, 90s, and the types of farming we did previously has had a big impact on our environment. And at the same time, of course, we are growing. So I'm based in Auckland, and you can see just the city spreading out. So I think there's a lot more pressures on the natural environment in places like Auckland. So it's tangible, and also the climate has definitely changed. It just has. The quality of the feel of summer today is very different than in the 70s and 80s, and it's frankly a little alarming. And we're seeing, we are now, of course, seeing these very long, dry, hot summers. Auckland has been in a drought this past year. It does feel like we are going to have to start getting ready for quite a different climatic system.
Yes, definitely. And it's interesting, I feel there's a ramp up of all of these changes, of course. And now, of course, there's always deniers of everything, but for the majority of the public and for most people that are listening to us, there's, like, we can see it, and we can see it especially on some places that it's not like in the future climate change is going to become an issue. Like, there's some islands in the Pacific and some other places that are already now being affected very badly, and being able to have that, in a sense, as a motivation for us as individuals to understand, like, we can do something about this.
Exactly. Yeah, no question. That's a good point you raise. Our proximity to the Pacific, and the fact that, so much of New Zealand's population now actually, we are a Pacific nation. So we have a responsibility, both to ourselves and to our Pacific neighbours, to do everything that we can, individually and collectively, to try and make a difference. And maybe New Zealand's, obviously, if you look at, our footprint relative to countries like China, like the US, obviously, you know, you could say we can't make much of a difference. But the one place I really believe we can make a difference is by being that example of a country that does its bit. Everybody's part of the movement to live a lifestyle that is less carbon intensive, and you know, even socially we pay attention to and have a focus on justice. So that's how we can, I believe, be able to have a global impact at a very local level in New Zealand.
Yes, definitely. And I feel, you know, and it's something that for me, this is super important, is understanding for everyone our connection with the land, our connection with the environment, our connection with each other, and not feeling separated. And I think that, you know, with this year, especially with COVID and everything, there has been a sense of a little bit more of that for a lot of people. And I'm super excited really about the learnings that we can take from this, as well as the learnings that we can take from life, in a sense, slowing down and starting to listen and starting to appreciate some of the ancient knowledge that had a better relationship with the land and the place that we have in that as community, as you mentioned before. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about that, like that place of community. What's the importance of community for this?
Well, I don't know if I can improve much on what you just said, Brian. I think, you know, those are all the absolutely essential points that you make, you know, and yeah, I think maybe, as you say, if we, you know, if you look at the COVID lockdown in March, April, you're right. I think people, a lot of people, it was almost not politically correct to say it, because I know that for some people it wasn't easy and it was hard and people did lose jobs and there were stresses. But there are also a lot of people for whom it was quite transformational. And they, you know, they actually would admit that they kind of loved it. You know, that for all the reasons you mentioned, it sort of gave us a permission to step away from the busyness, the sort of just the 9 to 5, and experience. First of all, didn't you notice how quiet it was? I mean, that was amazing. In Auckland, it was just so quiet, and there was no noise of traffic, and that in itself, I think, just helped people to relax a little bit, and you don't even notice on a day-to-day level, you know, on a day-to-day basis, how much just that low-level noise actually winds you up, you know. So there was a quietness. People were exploring their local places. And, you know, quite rapidly we saw improvements in environmental indicators. Air quality improved. You know, a friend of mine who does a lot of diving in the Hauraki Gulf was talking about even the marine life was less stressed, less frenetic, because less boats, you know, less noise, less churn. So yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's about connecting and with our local places, having that sense of care, guardianship, ownership. But not only that, also actually knowing how to be a help. And I guess that's the role EcoMatters tries to play. It's like, you know, this is how you practically do things that can make a difference. And that's around the, you know, restoration, you know, how to reduce waste in the house, you know, how to live a lighter day-to-day existence in terms of what demands we put on the ecosystem.
And I love that word that you just mentioned. Like, well, actually two words. One is the being a guardian, like a kaitiaki for the land, and the other one is the restoration. And I think that for these times, especially that sustainability as a concept has been a little bit watered down. Talking about restoration, talking about regeneration, it's so important, and that is what you're doing. Can you talk a little bit about where you see the difference between sustainability and restoration and regeneration?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a very this is a long running conversation, obviously. With sustainable development, of course, the whole notion of it dates back to 1987 and the United Nations Brundtland Report defined as, sustainable development as development that meets the needs of the current generation without reducing the ability for future generations to meet their own needs. But of course, implied in that concept of sustainability is this idea of progress and growth. That has been, is it an anomaly? I'm not sure, but it's certainly been one of the underpinning dilemmas, if you like, of the sustainability conversation is, what are we trying to sustain? And as you say, the term sustainability has been increasingly sort of taken by economists and so on, and now we talk about sustainable growth. So to come back to your question, I guess, sustainability is about just what it sounds like, sustaining. Restoration or restorative practices is about more than that, because it's about actually asking, well, what parts of the current system do we need to sustain or want to sustain? And what parts of the current system do we identify as actually we need a radical change, or a quite different model? And so sustainable growth is, for me, one of the most important concepts that we really need to ask some big questions about, because the reality is, since 1972 and the publication of the limits to growth, we've modeled that if you continue to draw down endlessly the finite resources of the planet, there is a point at which growth is no longer possible. But of course, furthermore, we reach a tipping point where the systems that we rely on to make those resources available to us also collapse. And that's the situation we're in now. And I think, to point, if you think that's just a theory, I mean, even very mainstream sort of environmental actors such as Sir David Attenborough has done a very good new show on Netflix. I can't remember what the name is, but, he's actually talking about this. I think he's put together an excellent sort of explanation of the issues of this. And so, the information is out there for people in a way that is quite mainstream now. I don't think there's much room to argue that we can carry on the way we have been for the past sort of 100 odd years for another 100 years and not be in a pretty grave place by the end of this century. Yeah. So come back to your point, I think for me, restoration is about going beyond just sustaining and actually having a mindset of improving again and rebuilding and really putting an attention back on restoring ecosystems as much as we can.
Yes, I remember some episodes ago I talked with Maori Rongoa practitioner, and she was talking about the concept that we have been so growing a part of nature that we don't even know what she needs. We, like she was saying, like we, like every time that there's like rain, we cover ourselves instead of understanding like, okay, like it's just water coming down and nourishing us, nourishing the land. So people think like, oh, I hope that it doesn't rain, whereas rain is needed for the land, where all of the insects, we kind of, like she was saying, like we talk about them as creepy crawlers, and it's like, oh, like these bugs that are there, and it's a sign of a healthy place. And I think that is when she mentioned that, I was like, yes, this is the reality. Like if we are disconnected from that, how can we take care of her?
Well, look, you're absolutely right. And I think you referred before to, you know, how do we tap into sort of indigenous knowledge and ways of being with nature more. And yeah, we're very, very blessed in New Zealand to have a sort of resurgent interest in traditional Māori practices that, as you say, help us actually connect back to nature and understand nature in a different way. Actually, I was very fortunate to spend a few hours a couple of weeks ago with a rongoa expert down in Wellington, and you know, her encouragement was really to step into nature and just stop and actually take notice of what the signs are around you when you're in nature. What are you listening for? What are you paying attention to? And it was very powerful, actually, just to take that different mind into the bush. And she was showing us a whole lot of different native plants. And it was amazing that, you know, you talked about rongoa, like the knowledge of sort of how those plants can be good for us. And often the shape of the leaves, the structure of the tree gives a really strong clue as to what part of our bodies those plants can be good for. So we've lost a lot of that. I think we, you know, in our Western society, we've lost touch with that sort of understanding. And we are very driven by ego and sort of and this idea of self and my personal identity, and of course that then I think naturally creates for us as a society a lot of anxiety. You know, am I good enough? Am I smart enough? Am I cool enough? Am I rich enough? You know, and that just builds that disconnection. When you go and spend time with nature, walk in the bush and so on, that kind of falls away quite naturally. And I think, you know, there was some interesting research that Landcare Research did during the first lockdown that really showed that people strongly reconnected to nature over the lockdown, and they found that had a really beneficial effect on their well-being. So yeah, all of these things are connected, but we are so lucky in New Zealand that we do still have access to these knowledges, but we need to go and search them out and find out more. But the more you understand about the bush and the dynamic system it is, the more I'm sure anyone will be inspired, and the more it opens up this whole other world that is existing right next to us, that we're just not giving enough attention to.
Yes, and talking about that, Damon, where or what have you noticed in the last few years in terms of, you know, that reconnection and that inspiration? What you're doing at EcoMatters, that you're doing a lot of that. You're running a lot of workshops and events. What have you noticed in terms of the interest, and especially I'm interested in the younger generations?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Every time we host a rongoa workshop, it's booked out in a day, and we have a waiting list. You know, I think the last one we had a waiting list of something like 60 people. So there is an absolute hunger, or yeah, I believe a sort of a hunger for this knowledge at the moment. It's just really, really sought after by the community. So I think that's amazing and fantastic. In terms of the younger generation, I mean, I think I can't speak on behalf of the younger generation, but it does feel like, to observe our young people today, they quite naturally get the need to take care of nature and to be environmentally focused. But I also strongly resist this pressure that somehow we've got to give the responsibility of saving the planet to children and young people. So I don't think it's I think it's a bit of an unfair burden for us to have sort of got the planet to the point it's in today, and then it's an abnegation of our sort of individual responsibility to say, here you go, young people, can you sort this out, please?
Yes.
You know? So it's not an excuse to step away from everybody being an actor in terms of making a difference, I guess, or being part of the solution.
Yes, definitely. And I do think that it's very interesting, because I see, and this is not only from the young generation, I see it a little bit more in the younger generation, just because I am in the younger generation. But there is this interesting dynamic of there's this growing awareness, but as well, there's a lot of disconnection, because we are much more connecting online with our devices and not so much outside. And I think that this is where some hubs like EcoMatters actually help so much, that there's a place for people to go to and to actually learn and to be in nature. What do you notice with that? And what is the place of technology for you in all of this?
Yeah, that's a really, really great point. And look, I have quite a lot of teenagers in my life. It's not an uncommon thing for me to come into the living room and there might be 4 or 5 teenagers, but they are all individually just on their devices. So they're not actually talking to each other. They're sort of engaging through content, maybe, oh, look at this, or look. And it is kind of sad, if I'm honest. Like I guess, okay, I'll give it away. I'm nearly 50 now, but we didn't have the internet when I was a kid. So it just wasn't, it just wasn't, it was a different world. Where am I going with this? I don't know. I think you're right. I think that for some people, I mean, it's a blessing and a curse, isn't it? Like there's a global awareness and a sort of, I mean, a lot of the teenagers I deal with or have, in my life, they're very aware of sort of social justice issues. They're vehemently opposed to racism. They understand their privilege in a way that, I didn't even know what privilege was when I was a teenager. We weren't having those sorts of conversations at that point, really. So that's positive, I suppose. But yeah, the downside, as you say, is that people probably feel maybe more isolated, maybe more depressed, and maybe a little tired. I mean, I don't know about you. I'm noticing a lot of people are very tired at the moment. And I don't know whether that's a symptom of our digital overload, but we do have a lot coming at us, and I don't think it helps, put it that way. So to come back to your point at EcoMatters, or even individually, it is about, and I know everyone's saying this, and it's one thing to say it and do it, but you have to disconnect. You have to put your device away, take the kids for a walk, get out into nature, turn the modem off. You know, you have to do those things. I also just talk with a lot of parents, and they find the whole stress of managing their kids' devices is actually exhausting, you know, and so the simplest thing really I think to do is actually just, switch off and go for a walk, because trying to manage it in the house is a battle. But, you know, digital media is powerful and it's addictive, and our kids are used to the serotonin that comes from connecting in. So it's not an easy battle to win.
Yes, I mean, I see it as well with adults. Like, it's not just the kids, and that is one of the things that I think that, of course, kids are modeling us, and of course they grew up with that. We didn't have that growing up. I didn't even have that when I was a kid, but now I see so many adults like everywhere, and they have like their phones, and they're going out for a meal or something. They still have that. And I just came recently. I went on retreat. I try as much to do that. Just turn my phone off, my devices off, connect to nature. Even with me, that I have a regular practice every single day. I walk around. I am in touch with nature as much as possible.
Yeah,
I still get so much benefit from taking a weekend away in nature, not my phone's off, and it's amazing what that's.
absolutely. And so, it is about being conscious about it, isn't it? Like, you know, and maybe that's conversations we need to be having with our young people. And as you say, I mean, you rightly point out, it's, you know, it is us as well. And so being really conscious about a digital detox. Yeah, and you're right. It takes a day or a couple of days to sort of get it out of your, get it out of your system. But after that, you do start to feel different.
Yeah, definitely. And just a few last questions that I would love to know. What is one resource that you would recommend to others?
For,
like, if they want to connect more and learn more, it can be, you know, like a movie or a podcast or a website.
Okay. Well, of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't encourage people to visit ecomatters.org.nz, because in all seriousness, I believe that we're in a really good place at the moment as an organization, where we're sort of, we've got a really nice collection of ways in, you know. About 2 or 3 years ago, we sort of clarified what environmental issues or priorities we are addressing. And that gave us a real clarity to start to help people to find the thing in EcoMatters that they're interested in and become involved with that. So we have our bike hubs, you know, which is about repairing bikes and getting people cycling, but the community that's building around those hubs is actually what's most exciting about it, you know. And we have people coming in. We have these amazing volunteers that come in every day that we're open, you know, like clockwork, and they've got to know each other, and it's just social, and it's just good. You know, we run our nursery, so we have 2 volunteer sessions a week, and that's about taking baby trees and spending time with your hands in the soil and potting them up, you know, and those trees are going to go out into projects, and they're going to, you know, over the next 10, 15, 20 years, they're going to grow, and they're going to take carbon from the atmosphere, and they're going to store it in the soil. So, you know, that small action of connection is actually having a really significant impact longer term. You know, it's very meaningful. And there's a very, you asked about good resources. The new Woody Harrelson movie on Netflix, I highly recommend. Is it Touching the Earth?
Kiss the ground.
Sorry?
Kiss the ground.
Kiss the ground, there you
Yes.
go. But what I like about that movie is that it's actually exciting people about soil and dirt, and that we need to get excited about soil, I believe, because so much of our health and our wealth actually it comes from soil. So and notwithstanding that, as they mention in that documentary, soil stores carbon. The fact that it stores carbon is also, of course, a major issue for us as the planet warms up, because this is what we're seeing in the Arctic, of course, and so on. As the permafrost melts, there's a massive amount of methane that will be released into the atmosphere. So yeah, we've got to start cooling the planet. That's got to be our focus over the next 25 to 50 years. And one of the ways we can do that is build soils and plant trees.
Yeah.
Then we have, our community garden. So coming down to the community garden, learning how to grow your own food. It's so rewarding growing your own food. And you don't have to grow everything, but even just starting small, growing your herbs, growing your leafy greens, it's just something that everyone should get involved with, and it's liberating also to realize that, you can own that process, and you can be part of your own well-being and feeding your family. So all of those are things that we offer here, and I guess then we just have a whole range of workshops. I was at a healthy eating workshop here on Saturday with a local naturopath and GP, Paloma, and just the fun of preparing food all together. And we went and foraged, and we picked things that I wouldn't have thought you could even include in a meal. And then just eating really healthily together, it just made everyone feel so happy and so good. Everyone was smiling, and it's just a reminder that it is that attention and that simplicity and focus that brings us together and creates community and creates a sense of purpose, and it's so rewarding. So that's where I would encourage people who have an interest in this stuff to take a look.
Mm-hmm.
And the documentary by Woody Harrelson is very good, and the new David Attenborough movie is very good for a big picture analysis of where we are.
Yes, definitely. Yes, those are really good resources. I'm actually super inspired that some of these documentaries now are becoming more and more mainstream, and being able to actually then have people follow up and go to check some resources like EcoMatters to then learn, okay, this is how I can actually do it now that I have this inspiration. And with saying that, if you had to give someone just one tip, what would that tip be?
Just one tip. Wow, Brian. Do something.
That's good. Yes. Conscious action. That's always the thing with us. It's like go and actually do something.
Well, just doing something with the intention of it being a deliberate action of care and taking responsibility. I guarantee anyone that just does something, that will feel good and they'll want to do more.
Yes, definitely. And from a personal perspective, Damon, what has been your latest small act of kindness?
My latest small act of kindness. I dug a potato patch recently in the back garden, Someone was encouraging me to use a plow. I won't name the person. I love that person, by the way. But I felt that using the plow was going to harm a lot of beneficial worms and insects in the soil. So rather than using a plow, which feels quite an aggressive action in the soil, just gently digging up and it's just that care and respect for creatures other than humans, and recognizing that they are just as important and have just as an important role, and that you need to care for all the parts of the ecosystem. As you said before about, our sort of strange fear of insects and so on, but we wouldn't be here without the function of insects and bees and worms and ants that kind of work tirelessly day in, day out, processing waste, processing the resources of the earth and turning them into useful end products like honey and so on. So just noticing and being careful around all aspects of the ecosystem, and that's being kind, I think.
Yes, definitely. And perhaps this is one of the things that you have mentioned already, but what is the one thing that you wish that everyone in the world knew?
That they matter, and that, as you said before, that they're not alone.
Yes, beautiful. Oh, I just got goosebumps.
Yeah, we're all connected, as you said before, and people need to know that.
Yes, and that everybody matters, definitely. As you were saying before, like when you were mentioning going into nature and that I'm not enough or all of that just goes away. Like it's a big deal knowing that we actually are part of something and we actually do matter, because a lot of people don't feel that. Yes.
There's all sorts of messaging around us that we don't matter. So yeah, it's not surprising that so many people feel that way.
Yes, definitely. And I want to take the time, Damon, to thank you for being here with us, for sharing what you know, for all of the work that you're doing at EcoMatters. For everyone that is interested, please follow the work that EcoMatters is doing on Instagram or Facebook, and go to the website and check. There's so many resources. If you're in Auckland, go in person, check some of the workshops and check the work that they're doing. Go and get your hands in the dirt, as Damon was saying before. And I really encourage everyone to go and do that, because everyone does matter.
Yes. Thank you, Brian.
Yes, thank you, Damon. And thank you to everyone that has been listening to this episode. We would love to know if you learned something from this. Put it in the comments when we share it, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.
What did you like the most about this episode? Take a moment to think about what change you can make in your life today.
Share your conscious action on social media using #ConsciousAction and tagging @ConsciousActionNZ, so we can celebrate your impact on the world and create a ripple effect.
One easy action we would love for you to take right now is to share, like, and subscribe to this podcast. This will help us get these messages out into the world and inspire more people to take conscious action in their own lives, contributing to the better world we hope for.